guys, welcome to the Sanditon Chronicles. I'm your host, Maureen, and we have our co-host Janice with us today. And we are recapping episode 4 for everybody. And this was a very pivotal episode. We learned some new things about Georgiana. We met a new character who plays a very big role. And I'm curious what his role is going to be moving forward. If they're going to stick with no, he's in the Navy, or if they're going to keep him here. So I think really, really interesting character spots all around. And I think we see a new side of everybody a little bit. So we're going to jump right in. I know that we start with Arthur and Diana. So let's dig into them a little bit. They were the ones that made me laugh the most in this episode. They're the first ones we see, but they also made me laugh the most in this episode.
Yes, they were so excited that Dr. Fuchs was sticking around because now they had a doctor to go to. They're definitely the hypochondriacs of this series.
For their daily repairs.
Yes. And yeah, that was fun. And you know what I really noticed, I've noticed it before, but I really noticed at the beginning of that scene where she meets them is just how well coordinated all the color of the clothes is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just his jacket is that maroon and it goes with Charlotte's pink. And anyway.
Yeah. The costume department did a really great job on this. I was noticing today as I was rewatching it for the first time, we're going to jump back to Arthur and Diana for a minute, but
yeah,
in the scene where, in this episode where Charlotte goes to visit old Stringer after his accident and she's walking out, I noticed for the first time there was a shine on her dress. So it must have been like a taffeta sort of material. I never noticed that before. I always thought she had just linens and cottons, but there wasn't. There was a shine on her dress. And so I love that I've seen this show at least 40 million times each episode, and I'm still picking up new things every time I watch it. That's great.
Yeah, it's one of the great things about this show. You can't say that about a lot of shows. I will say that there's a few I can think of, but yeah, not many.
There's a lot of detail that they put in this, and the set designers, that's a credit to them too. And like whenever they're in the streets, I always try to read the newspapers that are behind them. So there's always something fun there. And Paula Byrne had said that they try to do some little things in the shop windows. So now I always try to find those. So there's always going to be something more that we can get out of the show.
Yes, I agree. And it's, you know, especially because we've, you know, talked with a lot of the crew about stuff like this, then we're paying more attention to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like too that even this far in, even episode 4, so we're halfway through the show now. We've seen the first 3. We only have 3 after 5, 6, 7. We have 4 after this. I can do math. But it's just hard for me. So we have 4 after this. We're on our 4th one. So we're halfway through in this episode, and we're still seeing new shades of the characters come out. And I think that's true, Arthur and Diana, because at first we first met Diana in Arthur and Diana episode 1. And Arthur was doom and gloom about what was going on. It was, we must get out of this howling gale. And Diana was, oh, I'm so excited to see you. But this episode, I went too high on Diana's voice there a little bit. I could hear it. In this episode, Charlotte approaches them and she's like, oh, it's a beautiful, I'm paraphrasing, but oh, it's a beautiful day. And Arthur says, oh, it's so great. And Diana says, it's anything but. If we're not scorched by the sun. And she's got this list of complaints. So they've we see them swap a little bit more every time we see them.
Yes, yeah, they definitely do.
And I loved Arthur in this episode. First of all, daily repairs. That poor doctor. There's 2 people going in to see him every single day. Yeah, they're paying him money, so I mean he's getting his money's worth. But I imagine that fixing their fake ailments every time they come in is going to be really difficult after a while.
And where he takes them in this episode, right?
Exactly. Yep. And he says, you know, I wrote down how he said it, where I gotta find it.
Well, I know he says that they need the exact same remedy, regular and vigorous motion.
Yep.
But she says she's a hypochondriac, and well, that's not exactly what he said. Hysteria. She was hysteria, and Arthur was. What was his diagnosis?
Not moving enough. He was too can't remember
sedentary.
Sedentary. Yep. But he says, it's been my honor to care for you every day this past week.
Yeah.
And you could hear it in their voice, but Diana was so thrilled to have a doctor say that to her that she just didn't even catch it. And poor Arthur is just he's so jolly about everything. He's like, oh, that's great. I'm glad. But when he had them, he said, my remedy is vigorous motion. And then they're on the horse, and Arthur looks
And
at her.
the donkey. One's on a horse, the other's on a donkey.
I never noticed that. Really?
Yeah.
Is Diana on the donkey?
Yes.
Because I think Edward slaps the horse on Arthur, so
Right.
Arthur has to be on
Yeah.
the horse. But they're at like 1 mile an hour, and Arthur's like, "We're at quite a canter now, aren't we, Diana?" You're going so slow, the dude holding the reins can walk alongside you.
And she's worried that if this speed, they'll hurt themselves if they fall off.
Surely.
No, it's funny.
But I love how every episode, and it's a build up to the final episode, because again, we still see another aspect of her character in episode 8. But this is just a build up of her getting more and more neurotic. And we've talked about this before when we talked about episode 3, when old Stringer got hurt. It makes me wonder what her father died of.
Yes.
Because the longer she's in Sanditon, the more neurotic she gets, the more hysterical she gets about illnesses.
Yeah.
And so really, I want to dig into that meat a little bit more. I don't know if we're ever going to get to, but I want someone to come up. I could do it, but I would like someone who's done the show, who's, a professional, to come up with a backstory of what happened to their parents. Because I think that plays into a lot of how Diana is. So Arthur is so excited by this horse ride that he says he's going to follow it up with a 7-mile march. That's the phrasing he uses, right? 7-mile march?
10-mile march,
10-mile
actually.
March. Yep.
10-mile march.
And I want to know what song he's singing as he's walking through the sun.
Yeah, I don't know that song. I don't know.
But he's also super far away from anything. He started at the beach, and now he's walking uphill in the summer, in the sun, far away from town. So did he literally walk 10 miles? Like, was he not exaggerating that?
I don't know. We can imagine. I find it hard to believe that he would have.
That he could make it that far.
Yeah.
But my favorite scene, I think, from this episode, from a comical standpoint, is when Dr. Fuchs finds him and Diana's there and he's saying, "Next time," and Diana's like, "Next time, have we not proven without a doubt that we cannot," again, I'm paraphrasing, "we cannot have exertions like this?" And Dr. Fuchs just takes a heavy swig of his drink.
Yes, he does. This is after he said, that Arthur's not going to die of a sunstroke, and then she's like, and so he says, "For you, sister, I'll adopt a recumbent lifestyle." Yes.
So they want help, but they don't want to be helped. Yeah. Essentially is what it is. But I do think that you can see, I wonder if part of her hysteria for him, because you see it, I think you see it the most in this episode. Would you say that? Out of all the episodes, you see her hysteria the most in episode 4. I think we see her, I think it switches from 5 on to be emotional hysteria rather than physical hysteria.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. Definitely.
I think that a lot of her, again, I'm going to bring this up, but I think that a lot of her hysteria with Arthur, and this is conjecture, but I think it has to do with her parents. She's mothering him in the way that is going to make him dependent on her. I think she understands and she knows that that's good for them, but she won't do it because then he'll be dependent on himself.
Right. And then, we find out later she's worried that he's going to leave her. So, that he won't be there to take care of her.
And I don't think it's a malicious thing. I think she just loves him so deeply. And I think her mother had to have died. I mean, there's only 4 of them. So her mother had to have died when Arthur was fairly young for Diana to have that mothering role for as long as she has.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I would agree.
And I imagine that would be difficult to let go of, especially when she doesn't have the typical mother-son relationship where the mother's going to die way before the son does. I mean, they're going to age at the same rate and be relatively close in age.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So then we can toss over to Lady Denham. And she starts talking about she's so disappointed because she gets this letter that is it I forget what the Wessex or Essex, Lord Essex has something like that, is married. And it just cracks me up when Clara says, "Well, I had no idea you planned to remarry, Aunt." And she's just like, "You ninny." I'm not thinking of me. I have money and a title. What else do you need in life, right? Anyway.
And I wonder, because we've seen that Clara she puts on a stupid air for Lady D.
Yes, she does.
So we know she's not stupid. So I'm curious what her motivation was behind asking that question in that way. But if you
To
notice,
find out what was going on.
yeah. But if you notice right after that, as she's responding to Lady D, she kind of like is looking over her shoulder, and you can see her eyes going back and forth. So she's reading all of the names that's written down
Right.
there as she's sort of like glibly just responding to whatever Lady D's coming out of her mouth. It's almost like she's just pulling random phrases that she's got stored away. They're
Yeah,
just
she just
automatically coming
wants
out.
she wants to know what Lady D is up to. What is she up to now?
Well, I think in this case, Lady D told her what she was doing, and I think Clara figured out she's talking about marriage for somebody, and I think Clara probably deduced Lady D doesn't want to get married again. She's too happy being in charge of everybody else. There's only
Right.
two other
Well,
people
she
she want to
said
marry
so.
off.
Yeah, that's right. And she said as much on top of everything else.
Exactly. So I think that Clara, I think she's always working to find a backup plan. Always.
Oh yeah, given her history, she's got to.
Mm-hmm. So I think her reading over the shoulder was almost like, okay, well, if she doesn't give me her inheritance, if I get kicked out, if something happens, these are all the names of the people I got to go to. And it was men and women, because it was women for Edward, men for Charlotte. Nope, it's Charlotte Spencer's her real name, but for Esther. So she's got women she can befriend, and she's got men she can try to seduce.
Yeah, that may be what she's thinking. Yeah. Or she also may be thinking, well, what does she have planned for Esther and Edward,
I think it was fairly obvious what she had planned for them, though, because Lady D obviously doesn't want to give her inheritance to anybody.
Right.
So if she
Right.
can marry them off, then hey,
Yeah,
my
all
job's
the
done.
better.
I can give my money to whoever, and she's going to do that anyway. But the other interesting aspect to see of Lady D is that she has no patience for others' needs or how long their needs take.
Right.
Like, obviously, Claire was milking it. She really was milking it. But that's just how Lady D is. It wouldn't have mattered if she was milking it or not with her injury. Oh,
Right.
you've had more than enough time, child.
Yeah. Yeah. It's barely a singe.
Exactly. Everything is done on Lady D's time schedule. Everything is.
Right. And so then she sends Clara to Denham Place.
Mm-hmm.
And Edward has been reading Babington's letter very sarcastically to Esther, and Esther really doesn't want to hear it, and she gets up and asks Edward to pinch me in to tighten her corset.
Yeah,
and there's a little intimacy there.
there is, but I have a theory about that, because I've always tried to kind of watch this scene. And at first I thought, well, it's just because she's annoyed with Babington. He's continuing to show her affection. She doesn't want it. She wants Edward. But I think Edward laughing at the letter, it upset Esther because he's saying that she's none of those things Babington is saying she is. I think that, to her at least, she sees that Edward is starting to see no value in her. And so she speaks his language with the stays request to pinch her in. She's showing him where her value is in her head. But you can see as he reads the letter, because at first she lets him read it. But the more he laughs, the more he mocks, the more he's saying, man, Esther, you're really useless. You're really worthless. No, this guy actually thinks you're a prize. Oh my gosh, what a fool he is to think you're a prize.
And well, and she says as much. She says, is it so unthinkable that somebody would want me?
Mm-hmm. But I think that I think it's a little bit deeper than that. I think she's really starting to see, because after that you see their relationships start to fracture more and more. I think she's truly understanding, not just thinking, well, maybe Edward doesn't like me, or maybe Edward doesn't value me. I think she's truly starting to understand that Edward doesn't value anybody.
Where his priorities are, yeah.
And I think that she's starting to see that because she's not monetary, she has no value to him whatsoever. So that's why she's gets up and says, well, okay, come and touch me in the barely propriety way. That's not a right sentence. That was a terrible sentence. In a barely okay way. And we'll use the excuse that you're pinching my stays, but we both know what you're doing. Let me show you what you're missing if you continue to feel this way. And so she starts to speak so Esther right there, we show she's not done, because I think in that moment, she might even also start to think, well, if Edward finds no value in me, and we're fighting for this inheritance, and I lose the inheritance, then I'm done. I have to keep him. I think she loves him too, but I think there's also this aspect to Esther of, I have to keep him. he is
Right.
my salvation. He is my only shot. He's all I've got. I have to keep him. And so she
Uh,
starts to speak his language and offer herself up in a way she wouldn't ordinarily.
Keep him and keep him happy.
Yeah. And just
Yeah.
how sad is that?
It's very sad. And it really, it's him. She's trying to buy in to get him what he seems to want,
Mm-hmm.
or at least bring him along that way. And it is very sad, because he has been manipulating her and continues to do it.
Yeah. And it just shows you how much he's attacked her self-esteem over the years.
How much what?
He's attacked her self-esteem over the years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
And made her dependent.
yeah, I would wager on abusive, at least mentally and emotionally, because he's made her cling to him alone and nobody else. Be
Yes.
wholly dependent on him and nobody else.
Yes. And anytime somebody else shows an interest in her, then she finds a way of putting him or her down.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And even when he says, "How many suitors have I seen?" I forget how he says it.
Her turn away. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
he knows that he's got her no matter what. So he doesn't even have to work. He doesn't have to try. He just knows that whatever, this little thing is gonna always be in my back pocket.
Right. As somebody to idolize me or
Mm-hmm.
look up to me or whatever,
Yeah,
help his ego.
exactly.
Well, and then Clara witnesses this little intimacy.
I want to
And
talk about her facial expressions too when she does.
yeah, go for it.
Because at first you see, and again, this is because of what she's experienced, and we see that later in the episode when she talks about how it happened with her. But when she first sees Edward doing that to Esther, she looks deeply saddened by this. And she
Mhm.
doesn't look scared, but she just looks like, oh, not another one, is almost what it feels like. And she just looks very, very sad at them. She looks despondently at Esther, like she feels pity for her immediately, but that's at first. But then I think that she, after a moment, because this is so ingrained in her that she has to fight for her survival, I think that she's sad for her, but she realized she couldn't afford to be sad entirely. So she forcefully switches to see the advantage, because at first she's kind of down. She actually is a little teary-eyed, she's a little sad. And then suddenly she takes a deep breath and she stands up straight, pops her chin up, and then her mouth gets very firm.
Yes, like it dawns on her just how she can use this to her advantage.
I don't think it dawned on her right away. I think because you see the sadness that she feels when she
No,
sees
no,
this.
I agree. But by the time she does what you're
Yeah.
describing, straightens up, and
Yep.
makes her, and drops the card off,
Mm-hmm.
not as quietly as she could,
Mm-hmm.
and makes her exit. She
Yeah.
never knocks on a door. She just walks in, quietly walks upstairs,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, and not that quietly lays the card down.
Yeah. Quietly enough that she had enough time to that's one thing that confused me, because Esther did hear it right away, the moment it was dropped, but she still had an opportunity to get down the stairs and out of the house before Esther saw her. Esther
Well,
saw her.
it took her a minute to get away from Edward and
That's
get
true.
over there, and she didn't follow her down the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
And
I really think that the moment that she started to feel sadness, I think she's kind of conditioned herself that when I feel sympathy for someone else, or when I feel like I want to help someone else, then I've got to stop it immediately. And I think that even in that, when she realized I can't afford to feel sorry for Esther, I think she still had to find a way to use this against them.
right, it'll be really interesting to see where these characters go in the next
I'm
series.
super excited about it.
Yeah, and we hope we see Esther too, at least somewhat.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So then they walk the beach to Sanditon House, and that's when they pass the Arthur and Diana, and he says, "What a
Preposterous young pair."
Yeah, and you're thinking, I think they're talking about themselves while they say this, in a slightly different way, and not such a visual way. And he says, "Oh, it's going to be over soon. We'll swim the Hellespont and roam the canals of Venice." So I looked up what Hellespont was.
I did that before too. I can't remember what it is though.
It was an area near Istanbul.
Yep.
That had,
that's right.
Kind of a swimming area.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was renowned in those days.
My note on that scene is Edward is delusional.
Yes, he is.
Everything is a game to him. Everything
Yes.
is something to be won, and not
Yes,
because it's worth it, but because he wants it, and he just wants the challenge of winning something.
yes. No, I think that's a good note. Yeah, for sure, because he is and the sad part is he misleads Esther when he does that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he can be delusional, but he doesn't have he drags Esther into it.
But I think he knows exactly what he's doing. I think that he does intend for Esther to be with him always, because I think he always intends to keep her in his back pocket, someone who will be subservient to him, even when he's married to someone else. I think that that is his intent, is to bring Esther wherever he goes, and have this, because he even says to her later in this episode that, we'll eventually have to marry. But
Right.
counting on her always having that level of love and affection for him that he can always use.
Well, he says you'll have to find a husband and I'll have to find a wife.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I don't know. He's hot and cold.
Yeah, I think
You know,
when he says that in that scene, that was one that stumped me for a while. Like, what? That doesn't seem like Edward's MO, to be honest and real with her, because it's always been a manipulation. But I think I think that was the first time that he's like, well, yeah, this is a fun game we're playing. But
mm-hmm.
eventually, it's not always going to be a game. And I think part of it might have even been she was showing no more interest in fighting for that money.
Right. She
And
was
then he was
worried
like,
she was gonna give it up and she couldn't he wasn't giving up.
no. And then I think that's why he said the things he said, is because, well, if you're not going to fight for the money, then you're not going to fight for me. And, well, you're just going to have to go get married then.
Yeah.
But I think even that might have been another manipulation, because I don't think Edward really has an intention of marrying. I think he has every intention of getting his aunt's money and then frittering it away and wasting it
Well,
away and doing
that's certainly
lavish
his first
things.
choice. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yes. And then they get to Lady D's and she's drawn up a list of young ladies with money for Edward to marry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty funny. You know, he obviously would like to marry for money and looks. And her concern is money, period.
Yeah. Obviously a top priority.
Yeah.
I looked at the word pedantic
Uh-huh.
and it made me laugh out loud, because Lady D is describing herself when she goes Edward.
Yes.
But it's
Yes.
someone who annoys others by correcting small errors,
Yes.
causing too much or caring too much about minor details, or emphasizing their own expertise, especially in narrow, boring subject matter.
Yeah. Yeah. And he, of course, he says something about the second daughter needing to marry, and she has what is it she has
Her
wrong?
squint is
Something.
barely noticeable from the side.
Yes, a squint. Oh, and
But I
he said,
can't see why one of the other four daughters wouldn't be suitable for you. And Edward's face is just like horror.
yeah,
It's all
brilliant.
Jack Fox.
Yeah, he played that part so well.
Even going on to when Clara says, I imagine no one could measure up to your brother. And he says, it's a fair point, I grant you.
Yeah. Have you heard that interview where he describes being on stage with his father?
I think I might have posted that, but I don't think I actually watched it.
Oh, it's so good. He says they were asking if they would ever do a show with all of the Foxes together, you know. And he says, I'm not sure. I did a play once with my father, and there were times when he say, I think at this point my character would come to the front of the stage, and he would say, Jack would say, well, why is that? And he says, because I'm famous. It's a great interview.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch that.
Yeah.
I do love him and his dad together. I did watch a couple interviews, not that one, but I did see a couple of them.
Yeah.
I think too, it's important to note that Esther obviously knows that Clara knew before she got there.
Oh, yes.
Esther's not stupid, so she knows that. But then you zero in on on Clara's face, and there's so much victory there.
Yes.
Where when she left Denham Place, she was determined. But when they're at Sanditon House, she's victorious.
Yeah, and she's letting her know that. And
And
I don't think Edward is picking up on it as much.
No, Edward's not as smart as you think he is.
No, no. Well, yes, I guess in the write-up for his part, it said he was very good looking, but not that bright.
Is that really what it said? That's awesome.
Yeah, that's from one of the other interviews and he's like, we should have left it at the beginning.
Because all Esther or all Edward is he's predatory and he's greedy and he's selfish, and that's all he's got going for him. I think though that he can be altered. I don't think he's ever had to be anything but that, which again
Right.
makes me wonder what their parentage is. I mean, maybe his dad was a jerk. Maybe his dad was the same way Edward was. I don't know. But
well, they certainly didn't leave him with any money, just a title.
yeah, so maybe his dad had like gambling debts or something. I don't know. There's had to be something because that used to be a glorious house. And it wasn't that it was wasted away solely by Edward and Esther. I think Lady Denham calls him out on it and says, you know, you've frittered away everything, and I know that you're chasing your tails or whatever. But so I think he helped it, but he certainly couldn't have done all of that. He's not that old.
No.
I mean, that's just my opinion.
No. I don't think he inherited much at all.
Yeah. And I think part of what Clara has figured out and why she's victorious is that she knows that Esther can't have Edward for obvious reasons. And she now realizes that Edward will take it all because Esther will give it to him. So she's seen that her only opponent now is Edward.
Right. Yeah. And
I think that's part of her victory.
And Edward, in trying to get the focus off of him, reveals Lord Babington's interest.
Yep. I think that was twofold.
Boy, what's that?
I think that was twofold.
Mm-hmm.
What were you going to say about it, though?
I was just going to say, boy, Lady D glummed onto that right away, you know, and even before that, she says, if you take a different attitude, I think we could find you a husband by Michaelmas.
Yep.
You know.
Mm-hmm. And I think that Edward, he gives up Babington to his aunt not only because he knew that she would focus on that. Obviously, she would focus on cementing that relationship and making it permanent. But I think Edward is a lot like Clara in this, where he's only concerned about the money. He just wants the money.
Oh yeah, I think you're entirely right.
He wants to do as little as possible to get it. So his other aspect is, if she marries Babington, not only, and that I think that's why Edward is leading her along so much, because yes, she'll have to marry because Edward's not giving her any money. So she's going to have to marry if she wants money. But if she's still in love with Edward, no matter what Lady D does, he's got money. If she marries Babington, she's going to marry a lord. So right. I think that's the other reason that, and it's also that I think the other aspect is that with her out of the way, and he doesn't see Clara as anything worthy of the money. He doesn't think she's even worth Lady D's first glance or any glance at all.
Well, he's the one with the title, not her.
And I think that he thinks, okay, if Edward is married, Clara is not an option. I'm the only remaining relative left for this money. Mm-hmm. So I think both Clara and Ham are thinking, I've got the victory here if I just do this one little thing.
Yeah, yeah. But, you know, it's ironic because if he had encouraged Lord Babington, she probably would have already been engaged. But he can't let go of that person who strokes his ego.
Exactly. I think he's complex like that. And also he's still fighting at that point for the money. And I think that he sees that I don't have a woman to complete my appetite. I don't know how to gingerly say that, but I think that Esther is one he sees as an opportunity for him to continue to be satisfied and to continue to have whatever he wants, however he wants it. And so I think he does want her to be married so he can have that money, but he doesn't want her to marry for love, I think is the issue. He doesn't want her to marry anybody else who makes her feel good about herself, because then she's going to realize what Edward really is. She's going to realize how Edward really feels about her, and Edward's going to give him, or Esther's going to give him nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
So he needs her to just marry for financial reasons only, so that he can always be in her pocket.
That's probably true. And then Clara really reveals her level of knowledge. And Lady D is so funny. You're so much more agreeable when you keep your mouth shut.
She has some of the best lines.
Oh, I mean, she's really good at delivering them, and she had great lines to work with.
Masterful.
Yeah. And so she tells her to go play the piano. And then Clara and Esther, Esther has to go help Clara by turning the pages. Mm-hmm. And that whole conversation, I don't know if Lily is really playing the piano when they're, if she really plays the piano,
I wondered
but
that
if
too.
she is, she's really good at it to have carry on that conversation and keep playing.
Mm-hmm. And I like that Esther says, I do not understand the point of this exercise. And then
Yeah.
she reveals her point is to get Esther to react so she can gain some truth. But I think her truth that she's trying to gain is, I need something I can use against you. And if I push you hard enough, you're going to snap and you're going to give me exactly what I want. So the whole visit is spent her attacking without attacking.
Yes. And so Esther leaves the room and Clara follows her out and, you know, reveals quite a bit about herself when she is sympathizing with Esther and really explaining to Esther what's going on
Yeah.
with Edward. She's making her see the truth.
And I think that once she saw that Esther was was not a threat to the money, because she would have given anything to Edward. I think that she saw that Edward is the one she's got to pull away from. Um, I think that you could really, and I think also too, what was happening with Esther, it spoke deeply to Clara, because she truly
Yes.
thought, as the more Esther got worked up, I think she truly started to think that she was being taken advantage of.
She could see it was the case. Yeah.
Mhm. And I
And
think that with her, she wanted to help, not for Esther's sake, not for Edward's sake, but because I think Clara could remember very clearly. Obviously, she talks about it. For me, it was an uncle. I
yeah.
think that she was brought back to that place, and her instinct was to help someone out of the same thing and make them see that they don't have to continue giving themselves so baselessly to another person's grossly wicked desires.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think you're right. Definitely. And then they go back to the house and Esther discovers Edward's true feelings, because she's like, I love you. You're the most important one. She's going back to the words he said about their travels. And she's like, he is like, we're dirt poor.
Yeah.
So, and he doesn't want to give up the battle for Lady D's money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we can see, and obviously that's the next episode where we see how they react to each other after that conversation. But I
Yeah.
think that that's the first time that her heart really breaks for her feelings for him, and she's angry that she feels this way for him, and she wants out of it. And I think that we see as we go on to the next episodes that she's actually very angry at herself because she can't stop feeling that way about him on a dime. She's not Edward. She can't just stop it like that.
Right,
But I
right.
think too,
And boy, Charlotte Spencer plays that role so masterfully.
yeah.
You know,
Every time I
uh,
watch her cry, I lose it a little bit.
I know, and so heartfelt in that scene. Yeah, and really incredible.
And she works
So,
so hard to be silent while she cries and to take away any evidence before she leaves the room.
yeah,
And I thought
yeah,
that was really well done.
it was. Yeah, I agree. And so I think we've covered them. So now we're going to start the morning with Mr. Parker.
Yes, let's
They're
do
at
Sydney and
breakfast.
Charlotte, and then we'll finish up with Georgiana and Otis, because I think they're the main focal point of this episode.
Oh, okay. So I was intertwining them, but that's all right. We'll do it however you want to.
And I think this is the first time we get a time reference too in this episode, because when they're
Hmm.
sitting down to breakfast, she says, "I've not been home in a month," so we know that she's been away from Wellington for a month at this point.
Right, right.
That's the
When
only
she
one
got
we
the
get,
letter
isn't
from,
it?
yeah, because she got the letter from her sister,
Mm-hmm.
and she is saying that her brother had grown 2 inches, and she says that can't be true. I haven't even been here a month.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'd been closer to 3 weeks, but
I thought
yeah.
she said, "I've only been here a month."
Well, yeah, less than a month or less, I think is what it
Yeah,
was. But
that's the only
but
time reference we get in the whole series, isn't it? Other than the summer ball, the end of summer ball, or whatever at the end. But I think that we don't
yeah,
really get any other time references.
I think you're right.
But we start with those two. We start with her faith in Sydney, right? Charlotte's faith in
Yes.
Sydney. And I love the conversation they have there. And just the dynamic they have at that table where Mary just ribs her husband without hesitation, without any fear, without anything. And Tom thinks it's hilarious and he takes it, he loves it, and he laughs and he apologizes. And Charlotte shows that Sydney has earned her faith and he's earned her trust.
Right. I love the line that
Mhm.
Mary has where she says, when he isn't understanding, not responding to what they're talking about, and she says, apparently his mind has a prior engagement.
Yes.
It was such a great way of putting it.
Hmm.
And yeah, and then when Charlotte says, he's worried about what Sydney's going to find out. Of course, they don't know the depth of it, but and she says, well, that Sid, you don't have anything to fear. I think he was quite energized by the regatta and
Yeah.
headed off for a purpose.
Hmm.
So, and then she apologizes for not having more faith in Sydney before. I mean,
Yeah. And she says that how did she say he grew on her?
he's a acquired taste,
Yes.
like anchovy paste.
But I like what Tom says first, where he's like, don't worry, my brothers, my
Oh
brothers' good
yes.
habits are often slow to manifest themselves.
Yeah, to present themselves. Yeah, and same thing, manifest. But he said, yeah, they're so don't feel bad about that. She was saying she had come jumped to a conclusion,
Yeah.
made an assessment of him too quickly,
Hmm.
and now she thinks better of it.
Yeah, I thought that was hilarious. And
Yeah,
then I do like the anchovy paste thing. Altogether too peppery for some, which
yeah,
is a perfect description for Sydney. Absolutely perfect. If they
yes,
would have written that in the casting sheet as a description for Sydney, that would have been perfect.
yeah,
I love that. Um, so I'm as we're going through this, I'm just gonna do all Charlotte stuff. So anytime she interacts with Sydney, and then so we'll do Charlotte Sydney together. So anytime they have an interaction with another character, whenever Sydney does, but she goes to check on old Stringer after this breakfast.
right. Yeah, I'm with you.
Hmm. And I love that because this is with Charlotte. We're just gonna go into this. I love that old Stringer dismisses the doctor's orders because the doctor has no idea what it takes to be a Mason.
Right.
He can't possibly be correct because I'm a Mason and I need to be working. Otherwise, I'm not a Mason. So this doctor can't be correct because he doesn't understand it.
Right, right.
And it just shows that old Stringer is kind of a workhorse and he doesn't know another way to be. He has no
Well,
idea
he's
how to
had
be
to
anything
all
else.
of his life, I'm
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that the dog's name is Hercules.
Yep. That was Leo Suter's idea.
Oh, it was?
Hmm. I'm pretty sure he said because they asked if that was the dog's real name and he said, yeah, it is. It was his. I can't remember if it was his dog or he named the dog. I don't remember. But I thought in the Instagram live he said that was he had something to do with the naming of the dog.
Yes, you're right now that you said that.
Yeah. So Stringer, we see his designs of the pagoda.
Right.
And then old Stringer's views on it are obviously unfavorable. And
Yeah, yeah.
I think that James Stringer is embarrassed by old Stringer's words, not necessarily because they reflect on him, but I think he's more embarrassed on the view that his dad has. That he'll
Yes.
never be anything more than what he is or shouldn't be. More
Right.
than he is actually embarrassed that his dad is saying that his work is meaningless.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And, you know, and she's so encouraging about his
Mhm.
drawings and stuff. And his father is just doesn't want him to get above his station, as
Yeah.
it were.
Yeah. And
And,
we are
and
going to dive into that a little bit later when we go into deeper into the Stringers because we had a talk with Rob Jarvis about this.
yes, I remember.
Yeah, that was a fun one. So then we see Charlotte goes over to Georgiana's house and
Yes, because the maid comes and collects her.
with the shiny dress. That, by the way, if you're wondering, when she leaves old Stringer's house is when she's got the shiny dress on. So Georgiana, she lies to and manipulates even Charlotte. Like there's nobody she won't lie to get what she wants. And she didn't even
No,
consider how her lie, if found out, would affect Charlotte. Like when they're asking
no,
Mrs. Griffiths to go out, Tom and Mary will be there. She didn't say Tom and Mary, obviously, but without any hesitation, not
gorgeous.
even caring what will happen to Charlotte, as Charlotte's going to go along with this because Georgiana's her friend. She doesn't think she's doing anything nefarious. and Charlotte or Georgiana just doesn't care. And that just made me really,
No.
it's a sign of immaturity for sure.
Yes.
But it just made me really sad.
Yeah. 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 We hope that there's more respect there from Georgiana in the next series.
And we didn't see it a lot in this season when after the kidnapping. We don't see she grew from that, but I think that's going to have a bigger role in season 2 and 3. I
I
think
hope
that's
so.
going to have a more profound effect on her than we were able to see in the short 2 episodes we got after that kidnapping episode.
Yeah.
But when I also think that it's hilarious that Mrs. Griffiths thinks a picnic, she's saying a picnic's horrible. It's terrible. No good. It gives way to licentiousness, and it's with your skirts up where anybody can see. But Mary and
Yeah.
Tom are going to be there. Oh, well, then it's good. It's a good thing then.
And she's also says it's the purview, that's not the word she used, but of the savages and farmhands.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, she's talking to them.
Yeah.
From some people's viewpoint, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There are those who would have and considered one of them a savage and the other one a farmhand.
Exactly. Yep.
So, she's being pretty insulting,
I
which
never
it'd
put
be
that together
interesting to
before.
talk. What's that?
I never put that together before.
And it would be really interesting to talk to Justin and find out if he said it for that reason, if he
Yeah.
had her say it for that reason. But yeah, and she goes on and on about picnics and all the things you just said. And then what do they do in the next episode at the cricket match?
I think that all the time.
They sit on the ground eating
with their skirts up.
Yeah. I mean, anyway, the skirts aren't up that much.
No, but enough for Mrs. Griffiths to complain about it with the picnic.
Yeah, that's right. And
I think about that every time I see the cricket episode, every single time.
Yeah, I know. It's just such a, contradiction.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
And the other line right in here that I just love is when Charlotte says to Georgiana, I've never known someone who could lie with such virtuosity.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
And in an ironic turn, Georgiana blames her deceit on Mrs. Griffith's goodness.
Oh yeah, that is a very typical teenager thing.
Yes. That was when I was like, okay, so the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, so she's not a horrible person. She's just immature and young.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt bad for Charlotte, so bad for her when Otis appeared.
Oh yeah, she was totally blindsided.
Yes, and afraid even. And I mean, Sydney charged with protecting her, and I think Charlotte would have done that without that. So I think Sydney extending that. I think we talked about this in our recap of episode 3. I think Sydney extending that was more just saying, "Hey, I trust you," because I think Charlotte would have cared for her friend no matter what. But if he was someone not good, if he was someone who was going to take things from them or hurt them in a physical way, you could kind of see Charlotte. She took her step back, like, "And who are you?" Like, she had no idea what to do at all. What is her first course of action to protect her friend in that, or even herself? She's got nothing.
And then he expected her to just leave the two of them alone together.
But so did Georgiana.
I know.
That's the part that floored me. Georgiana's whole immature intention in this entire thing, from lying and manipulating Charlotte to lying to Mrs. Griffiths and not caring that Charlotte was going to get caught in this lie, not caring at all about it. Her goal was just to abandon Charlotte the moment she saw him.
And this, it would be bad enough in modern days. It was terrible in those days.
Absolutely.
I mean, and credit to Charlotte, she doesn't abandon her.
Mm-hmm.
She stays with her no matter how difficult it is for them.
Yeah. it's that made me so irritated.
Yeah.
And the only reason Georgiana gets upset at Charlotte keeping her safe when she says that, when she's like, "You're a spy." No, that's clearly not what she said. She said, "I agreed to keep you safe." Yes. And the only reason she gets upset is because she knows she's in the wrong. She knows it. And that's why she's getting mad.
And I thought you were my friend, not his.
And if she took the time at all to know who Charlotte is, to learn her habits, to learn anything about her, she'd know that she wouldn't run and tattle. That's not who Charlotte is.
Right. And Charlotte was a friend to everyone, really.
Exactly. I love in the next scene when Otis and Georgiana and Charlotte have made their way through the woods and they're at this picnic spot. Charlotte stops them from kissing, and I just want to talk on this briefly, just because it's right here.
It's
She
great.
she says, "Tongue or pulled pork, perhaps."
I know it's a great line, and the timing on it was perfect. I mean, it was really good. And I'll tell you this is not my favorite episode. We've discussed it
Yes,
before.
I
But
like to call it your favorite episode.
yeah, but the redeeming value was where they had that picnic. What a beautiful spot they picked for that.
I wanted to go there so bad.
It's just gorgeous. And of course, purple's my favorite color, especially in flowers.
Oh, I did not know that.
So I called this episode "The Ice Returns with Force," or "The Fall from Innocence Begins."
It's good. So let's go to when they're leaving the water place, and Charlotte is doing the impersonations.
Okay.
Starts first with about Mrs. Griffiths, and then moves on to Sydney.
Right.
And what kills me about the scene more than anything else is that Sydney is so hurt by the impersonation that she does of him, and you can see it on his face. That, and again, this is a credit to Theo James, but he just looks so hurt by the fact that she's not only going against what he said, even though he never told her, "Hey, this guy's not safe. Don't let her around him." He just said, "Keep her safe." She did keep him safe by being there. She didn't abandon him. She didn't leave him alone. She was there. So that frustrated me a little bit. But that he, in his mind, she was not doing what she said she would, and then she was also making fun of him and mocking him, and it just feels like it confirmed the worst of his impressions in her in that moment.
Right. And then instead of trying to defend herself, she attacks,
Yeah.
him because of what she's just been told by Otis and Georgiana, which was, I mean, she needed to hear that, but they oversimplified it and put a certain slant on it that wasn't really accurate.
And I think too that because at first Charlotte also looks like, oh no, he just saw me do that, and she looks upset that he saw it. But then if you watch her facial expression when Sydney gets close to Otis and he says, "If I catch you near my ward again, I won't be held responsible for my actions." Basically,
yes, that's right.
The look on Charlotte's face transforms, and it was the threat, I think, that jump started her. She was impersonating to give them a laugh and to, he's so uptight, whatever. But I think it was the threat that she sees, and it's that sets her off, and she sees them, Georgiana and Otis, as harmless, no threat required. And then Sydney makes that threat anyway.
Right. I need to back up just a hair because I think it's really important. When they were gathering up their stuff, leaving the boat, which was a really funny episode, to return for him to catch the coach. And she learns that, slavery is still alive and well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of her fall from innocence is, she has no idea that that's still going on.
Yeah.
And how widespread the effects are.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's part of, I think, her vitriol against Sydney when after Sydney says what he says to Otis and then Charlotte blows up at him.
Mm-hmm.
It's because now in her mind, he's really fallen off of the white horse or whatever you would call it.
Especially with the threat to Otis. Because he has it in her mind that his only issue with him is that he's black, and then he threatens him in that way.
Right. Yeah. Right.
But when they're arguing in the street, I think that Sydney's points are correct and hers are naive because she's solely basing it on hearsay.
Absolutely.
And that's it. And even he says, you've known him for all of a few hours.
Right. Right. That's right. But he made a mistake by not telling Charlotte about him so that she would know, that might be a possibility. Why it never occurred to Sydney that Otis might show up to see Charlotte is like, what?
Because of what Georgiana said to him before he left in the previous episode.
I met Georgiana. Oh yeah, because she said Georgiana, you mean, said she was gonna behave.
Mm-hmm. And she said, I'll try to do better. And then immediately went against his wishes.
Right.
And the only reason she said that is because she knew if she said that in that way with that tone, as she can clearly see Sydney's trying to be a better person. She can see it. He's trying to be a better person. He's trying to be a better guardian. She knows that if she says it in just the right way, he will trust her enough to stay away longer. And so that's why he didn't tell Charlotte about it, because he didn't think it was a possibility.
Yeah. But even in the next episode, he seems credulous, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, so one of the great things is Charlotte says to Sydney is you could at least allow them a proper parting,
Yeah.
which then comes up in episode 6.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, so you think he's just not, he's ignoring her entirely.
There's
But
nothing about Charlotte that Sydney ignores.
no, there isn't. You know, we find that out as time goes on.
And I
Yeah.
think that's what's so heartbreaking about that scene is when she says, she say honesty. You want to talk about honesty, Mr. Parker? Is that what she says? Is the word honesty that she uses there?
I believe so.
And
Because he just has said, I should have known I couldn't trust you.
yeah, trust or something. I don't know. She says something
Yeah.
like that. But this again, this is a credit to Theo James as she's railing these things at him and he's seeing her opinion of him as it stands right now. Every word is a specific blow to him and he's actually rendered breathless almost.
Yeah.
Even when he says you speak out of turn, it's barely audible because he just cannot believe the pain that he's experiencing right now. And then when he screams, that is enough. My kids had sleepovers because it's, it's summer. So they each had a friend over.
Uh-huh.
Having to walk in the room and they're on their way out of the room and he screamed, that is enough. And my kid she just stopped still. She's like, what? Like, it's the TV. It's okay, just keep going. But the tone of his voice was so intense from the TV that my almost 11-year-old just completely stopped moving.
She knew that was important words.
Yes. So as she accused him, you can just see the pain becoming more and more clear because he still cares so deeply for her. And he sees, I don't know, it sucks that he, even after that, you can see the kind of man he is because you've pointed this out before. He makes sure she gets home safe.
Right. Yeah, he asked Stringer to walk her home, which most people would have just turned and walked away, but he doesn't do that.
Yep.
He's, and of course she's all wound up still
Yep.
and says, I want to take a walk.
Yeah, I'm not ready to go home yet.
Yeah.
The other thing that Sydney says to her too that I think is worth mentioning is that he says, you seem to find it impossible to separate your own opinion from the truth. And that's what she says, the truth. You want to speak to the truth, Mr. Parker.
That's it. That's what it is. Yeah, and what he says is true.
Mm-hmm.
He just doesn't have the whole picture,
but it was true.
just like she didn't have the whole picture. That's when you want to say, you guys need to, well, I guess that's what happens at episode 6. Finally talk it out.
Mm-hmm. And I think that all of his words were absolutely correct, but his anger was what was unjustified. He shouldn't have been that angry at that.
His anger came out because he was so hurt by the way she mocked him.
Yeah. And so that led her to believe you shouldn't be angry. You shouldn't feel this way. And when he was, it was, well, then that's further proof that what they say about you is right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Such a shame.
I don't know. I think she had a lot of guilt about getting caught.
Oh, absolutely. But I think most of that went out the door when she saw him threaten Otis because she believed every word Otis and Georgiana said.
Yeah. Yeah. She certainly wanted to believe it.
Mm-hmm. And even when she says, everything that she says is born out of naivety. She's totally gullible in this. And even when he's starting to say he doesn't have to defend himself to her, but he does. And he says, I don't even do that. That's not something I do anymore. She won't. She's so angry at the threat that he gave Otis that she deems that as absolute fact and she has to fully understand it. And because Otis, and she says that, I'm paraphrasing, but she says basically, he's given me nothing to worry or fear about while I was with him. He tried to get Georgiana alone, and then he tried to kiss her full on the mouth, and to the point where you felt you had to interrupt it. So
right.
He did actually do those things, but in her anger, she completely lost those points.
Right. Yeah. She couldn't see what his objection to her was, know. Yeah. I mean, his objection to him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then Sydney's still carrying this anger around when he goes back and talks to Tom.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is the moment that I think that his pain right there, it was sort of like now he's dropped all thoughts of taking Charlotte's words to heart. He did, and he got hurt by doing it. So he kind of starts to, he doesn't revert fully because you could still see that he realized it was the better way to be because when he lost his mind on Tom, he's like, try living within your means. That might help. And then he pulls back and he says, I'm sorry, Tom. But then he
Yes,
still
and
says
then he
true.
says, I gladly own my own mistakes, but I can't own yours.
Yep.
So he's really starting to recognize some things about himself.
Absolutely. And I think we glossed over this part, but I had a note on it. I was actually looking for it while we were talking. But when Sydney first comes back into town and he stops to talk to Mary.
Right, we did skip over that.
Yep. So
and has tea.
Yep. And so when he comes in and she says, Tom's so excited about looking for you. And then he's starting to sit down and she says, he's been so impatient for your return. I never caught the look on his face before, but it was kind of like, oh, geez. And he obviously knew what news he had and he knew what news Tom was hoping to have. And so the look on his face, it was complete dread when Mary mentions his impatience to see him.
And then he quickly shifts to saying, oh, he has me working on the regatta.
And then even quicker shifts to, where's your house guest?
Yeah. And that's why this episode just kills me to go from his warm feelings about her at that moment to the explosion when he catches her mocking him.
Mm-hmm. And he was openly looking for Charlotte. He wasn't even trying to hide that that's what he was doing.
No,
because he said perhaps Charlotte will still be there. It's clear what he's doing. It's clear what he feels because he wouldn't have said that about anybody else. There's no way.
Yes. No, that's right. And prior to this, he wouldn't have ever said it.
No. And then the last interaction we see with Charlotte and Sydney is the one that you pointed out last week when we were talking about their relationship, how it was the first time she had her hair up.
Right.
And they run into each other. I think that is, it's very, very giving, or it's very, very telling. Yeah. Do you want to talk about that with the hair up? What do you think the reason is behind that?
Well, I think it's because, now she doesn't feel all loose and, she's been disillusioned. And so she's put her hair up out of more of a sense of maturity. And she just doesn't feel free at that moment.
Yeah.
At least, I say this because of what the people that did the hair and makeup said, about why they had her hair down more than in most period dramas like this, where the hair would be up a great deal more, and obviously her hair is up, at the balls and, that kind of thing, but
not
every day. Yeah. And after what she just been through, to go home and put her hair up was interesting. And it just told, there was such coldness between them when they ran into each other at the bottom of the stairs. And it's how many relationships break up because of just a complete misunderstanding. It's a fragile point.
It is, absolutely. I think too that it's telling of how much Charlotte also takes Sydney's words to heart. Because she, as much as Sydney took her words to heart, as much as he was affected by them, I think she was too. This strand of hair will not get out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that her putting the hair up, it was her trying to kind of almost buck what he says, that no, I'm not naive. No, I'm not. I'm smarter. I'm mature. And I think that's also another layer to why she puts her. I think that everything you said is accurate.
Yes, sure. I agree.
But I think it's another layer of why she puts it up, because she's showing, no, I am mature and I'll show you. But I think that when they meet again, I think Charlotte's dealing with coldness. I think Sydney still has a lot of passion coming off of him, but he just seems so sad when they meet.
She is, I think she's kind of a mixture of things. And part of it is fear that the work she's now doing with Otis, she's going to get caught at, you know what I mean?
Well, she hadn't done anything yet.
No, but when she runs into it, well, not at this point, but she does in the next episode.
Yeah. But I mean, in this point, when they run into each other, I think that she just seems very angry still, very closed off and very, I'll prove to you, when they run into each other last time.
He seems pretty angry and cold too.
I don't think he seems cold. I think he seems really sad. I think he seems almost mournful.
I'll agree with that. Yeah. It's like he's so hurt about it all.
But I think there's still some because even when he says hello to her, he still gazes at her. And Charlotte just kind of looks at him and looks down and just barely says it. He says her name fully, Miss Hayward.
Yes.
And she just says,
Yes.
Mr. Parker, and then keeps going. He's the one who stands there still.
Right. No, you're right. Part of that was just, politeness, but yeah.
But he also watches her go a little bit. I mean, not fully, he doesn't fully turn his head that way, but his eyes flick to where she's walking and he's watching her leave a little bit. So
Well,
I
and we
think
definitely see that in the next episode. Yeah.
So I think he's definitely just really, really sad that this is how it turned out. Even though it didn't really turn out that way if he had just listened or just stopped.
Right. Right.
So we have one more couple to talk about in this episode.
Tom and Mary?
Nope. Georgiana and Otis.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. We talked about him a little bit, but yes, okay.
There's some other scenes that happen in this episode. So if you are watching this episode, we are not going in chronological order in the order of the episode. We are going as things happen with each couple, with each pairing, we're going in chronological order. But this episode, as Janice pointed out, you guys didn't hear it because I wasn't recording it yet, but she pointed out that this episode goes back and forth a lot between different dynamics. So we thought it would be better to go topically and chronological order that way. So we're just covering it. We're covering everything that happens in the episode, not exactly as you see it, but in the same timeline, in the same direction. So we start at the beginning of the episode and go to the end with each couple.
Right.
So with Charlotte and Otis, we did talk about why she gets upset, but how Otis and her are with each other. And I think that's what sets Charlotte off even more, because when they're sitting on the step, he's almost caressing her leg as she's
yes.
I can't remember if her legs are draped over his or not. But
no, they're not, but they're right. But his arm is around
all the way around. Yep. It's almost like on the bottom of her thigh as he's holding her close to him, and they're talking, they're laughing. And he says, don't believe anything she said about me. Until a few moments ago, Mr. Molyneux, I did not even know you existed.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
I think kudos to Charlotte for not letting any of that convince her to stay away, because it wasn't proper to even see that. Right. Let alone be alone with it. But it was improper to see it, and she stayed there. And just the way they were so brazen, they were so unafraid, they were so, I mean, Otis didn't know Charlotte. He didn't know who she was, what her position was, and he just was very, very openly affectionate and physical with Georgiana.
And it makes you wonder, makes you understand, I should say, just why Sydney was so concerned about this young man.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think he was way beyond concerned that he wouldn't just try to get permission to marry her.
Yeah. There's more than one way to the altar.
Yeah.
And I think that Georgiana, as they fought about, you're just a spy, whatever. And she fought while they're in the picnic scene, when they're by the beautiful purple flowers, and Charlotte's trying to get to know Otis. And he's saying, I'm a merchant. Well, what is your trade? And Georgiana says, careful what you say, Otis. And she's just being so immature, but she's also being so cruel to Charlotte.
Yeah, no, it's awful the way she treats her, And also, this is one of the nice things about those scenes is when she asks how they know each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then they brighten up telling the story of how they'd met at this ball.
Which
and
I love.
She was a servant. And she says, demanded something to drink.
I did not demand. I just asked.
That's right.
I politely asked, he said.
Right.
And I think within that same story, they're talking about Sydney. And I think that Otis, he puts the blame, he blames Sydney, and he continues to slander Sydney. It came out of an attempt to keep Georgiana against Sydney. Right. So that she never learned what he did. I think the reason that Sydney pulled him away, I don't think Sydney knew exactly what he had done, that we find out he did in episode 6. I don't think he knew that he used her name. I don't think he knew any of that. But
no, not yet.
While they're trying to find him, he says this is why he wants her, for her money, and that's why he pulls him away. So I think that Otis had an inkling that Sydney was either going to find out or he did find out, but Otis was very guilty at this point of what he did, and he knew what he did. I think. I mean, obviously, we're not given that information. Some might say, well, no, he might have gone back to London on it. Well, that's true, too. But I doubt that he had that kind of time frame to do that, because they were already intercepting his letters before episode 5 happened. So,
well, and also, obviously, this had been going on for a while.
Exactly.
Him, using her name to continue to be able to gamble.
Hmm.
And so yeah, he doesn't act guilty, but he, like when they're in the boat and he asks her to marry him again. And, well, now later you think it's not just because he loves her.
Yep. And I think, to be fair, I think he did actually love her. I think that in that moment too, it pains Georgiana every time she has to tell him no, because it sounds like she's had to tell him no several times. I
Yes.
think it causes Georgiana pain every time. But I think Otis, I think he was looking for a joking reply, but hoping
Yeah.
for a yes, judging on the way he said it. But Georgiana saw the necessity to make him understand because it pains her every time. But yeah, he kept doing it. I think he
Yeah.
actually loved her. I really do, but I think he also saw that, you know what? I do love her, but we are going to be together. So it's okay if I do this because it's going to be mine anyway. I love her. And because I love her, I know we're going to be together.
Yeah. It's an unfinished love story from this first season.
Yeah.
And we don't know if it will continue or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so I think that when he's talking about Sydney, I think that he knows that if Georgiana ever learned what he did, they'd be over. And I think that was twofold. I think he still needed to use her name, but I think he also genuinely loved her. And the thought of not being with her, I think truly pained him.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think so too. He is obviously showing her a lot of affection
Yeah.
and and it seems to be way more than just that he would like to marry her for her money.
Yeah. Though that certainly weighs heavily on it.
Hmm.
And I think too that because he's talking about Sanditon, he says, I cannot find a redeeming thing about it. I think Sanditon, as a growing town, what it has is it has laborers and it has those who instruct the laborers and tell them what to do, like Tom Parker. So it's got the Tom Parkers and it's got the old stringers. It doesn't have much else of anything yet because the other people can't come to a town that's not built yet. So
Right.
it's the builders and the ones who are funding the building. And I think that Otis knows exactly where he'd fit in this town. And I think that's why he can't, especially when we hear his backstory about the slavery.
Right.
He has no desire to be in a place where his only option would be basically labor.
Hmm.
And I think that that's his biggest issue with that town, with being in that town, why he doesn't like it, because that's his option.
Well, and also it's a place that Sydney has taken Georgiana to get her away from him.
Yeah,
For
that's
that
true.
reason alone, he wouldn't like it.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think that when we get his backstory, which is really sad, but still it's hopeful. His backstory itself wasn't so much sad as what you know that I mean, we know now because we have history. This was in like what 1817, 1818.
Yep.
We know how long slave labor goes. We know how long the slave trade lasts. So we can look back at it and see that it is sad because he got out, but so many others didn't for so many years.
Yeah.
Over a
He was
hundred
very
years longer.
fortunate. And he was very fortunate to have a man who freed him.
Hmm. Yeah. And I wonder why Charlotte thought it was done because I guess because there were black maids and there were also white maids. Maybe that's why. Maybe because she lived in a country where there wasn't any diversity. Like I wonder why
I think
she thought it was
her
done.
I think because what she knew about slavery was out of history books and it wasn't recent history. And
Mm,
her father told her about slavery, but not like it's still going on.
yeah, just that it
You know,
happened.
the cotton you have is from slavery,
Hmm.
so she just lived in such a sheltered area. You know, I grew up in Kansas. And the first time I ever saw, which was the whole area I grew up on, was very white and very, very sparsely populated for that matter. And then when we were traveling through St. Louis once on this trip we were starting, and we went through this intersection, and there were some black people there. And my father, because he comes from the old school, he just
Hmm.
died at 90. He said, oh, there's some colored people, probably knowing we had not seen blacks before. Colored was the old term, but my reaction was, I don't see pink or purple people.
Yeah.
That's what I thought when he said colored. And so, I saw the people that were black, but so it was just, anyway, it's just interesting. So she comes from an environment sort of like what I grew up in,
Yeah.
that was so isolated. This is, during my lifetime, television started, I mean, it started, and I don't mean it, the very first televisions were produced before that, but during my lifetime, television became common.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, there was a lot of things you didn't realize were happening before television.
That's true. And she did she didn't really, she'd never been out of her town. She'd never been out of her area ever. So
Right? If
this
her
is also
father
new to
doesn't
her.
go, she didn't go.
Exactly. And I think too that Georgiana's connotation there when she indicates that Otis, she indicates him in the Sons of Africa and how he's doing something to eradicate slavery. He's putting in the work. It kind of feels like the connotation there is that he's in every way better than Sydney because
Yeah,
of his involvement with the Sons of Africa. And I think that she's trying to make Charlotte, I don't think she's saying it so much for Otis's benefit or even hers. She's trying to make Charlotte swear an unallegiance to Sydney and to
right.
go over to her and Otis's
Well,
side.
it's sort of two sides. Yeah, that's right.
And I think that where the issue is where does her info of Sydney and his slaves come from? So you have to wonder if she's been told that by Otis, but she says, ask him about his time at Antigua. So maybe her father had said it, or maybe he partnered with his father and his father had slaves. But Sydney left shortly after her father died with Georgiana, right? And
Right.
her father let all the slaves go. So
Right.
why does she think Sydney still
Yeah.
owns
Well,
slaves?
he's saying, obviously he came to Antigua. I think that probably his Sydney did team up with his father and earn money that came really from the benefit from the slaves, but they both came to realize that that was wrong, and that's why he released the slaves. She would have been quite a bit younger at that time.
Yeah.
She's 19 in this story. I think I read somewhere that she had been in London for like 5 years. So she would have only been what, 14 or younger when she left Antigua.
Because she's what, 10 years younger than Sydney? Is he
9, I
29?
figured.
He's
About
28
9.
or 29, somewhere in there.
28 in the story.
So you think that he would have, around 17, 18, he would have gone to go with Eliza. So she would have been roughly 7 or 8, maybe 9 when Sydney came down there.
When they met.
Yeah. And so when he goes down there, he's this broken guy who's only lived where he's lived in England with his family. He goes down there not knowing what he's doing, partners with whoever he can. And yeah, he probably did do the slave trade at first. Probably.
Right. And then he came to realize what that meant. And that's what he says later on, is that
that's why he got out of it.
He has disavowed it. Yeah.
And for Georgiana had to have known that, because she would have been out of there not that much longer after he released them.
But who knows? I mean, I do think she knew more than she was saying, but she was choosing to mention the negative part.
But I think also that Otis got in her head about it too.
Oh yeah.
I think that because Otis, he has seen first. I mean, his entire family was ripped away from him by slavery.
Right.
Probably, if we are looking at history, probably fairly brutally ripped away from him, violently and bloody and harshly, and probably watching his female family members get raped or whatever. And so he avoids anything to do with that.
Maureen, as often as not, blacks sold other blacks into slavery.
Yeah, they did.
But yes, they took them, or they,
but it was still brutal.
Right. It could have been brutal. Yeah, absolutely. Or they could have just caught them alone. Maybe they were out foraging and they caught him. And
I thought Otis said that he and his siblings were taken from his parents and sold off.
That could be.
I'm pretty sure Otis said that.
Yeah, that could be. And that happened. All of that happened.
Yeah. And so I think the reason I'm saying that is because I think that Otis had this preconceived temperament that anyone who had slaves, he's seen what slave owners do to their slaves. So I don't think he really I don't think it's so much that he is trying to manipulate her. I think that it might be even more that he thinks that if you've owned slaves, if you have a slave trade, you see what slaves do for you, so you have to do nothing. There's no way that you're going to give that up because you own slaves.
Although the man that
Mm-hmm.
freed him did give it up, and she knows that her father's slaves were freed. But yeah, I mean, they're just choosing to see the negative.
Mm-hmm. I got the impression that Otis is the guy who bought him to free him. Was the
Oh, and
impression I
that
got
could
from what
be,
he said.
but nonetheless, he was
Yeah.
still a slave when he got him.
Exactly.
And the other thing is, so when they're telling this to, when Otis and Georgiana were telling Charlotte that about, you know, that he needed to look at, she needed to look at what happened with Sydney, and to believe the reasons for Sydney's objections were only about race.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you know, I'm sorry, but I think Otis knows that's a lie.
Oh, he absolutely does. One, Sydney's protecting Georgiana. She's black.
Yes.
So
right.
But that was my note too, is that when Otis apologizes as the Charlotte, Georgiana's response is obviously untrue, and that's the reason for Otis's expression, was my note, because he doesn't dispute it, but he also looks pretty daggone guilty.
Yes, I agree with you. And you know, obviously it's a big shock to Charlotte, and then she repeats it.
Yeah.
To Sydney.
And I think for Otis, letting her believe that was better than the alternative.
It suit their purposes.
If she knew why Sydney was really keeping me away, we'd be done.
Right.
So I'm okay letting you think this.
Yeah, that's right. And he wasn't going to go against Georgiana.
No. And even when they're at the carriage, when they get out there and they're, you know, they're getting ready to say goodbye and they're doing all this stuff, he doesn't fight Sydney. He doesn't dispute it. He doesn't defend himself. All he says is, I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure of the welcome I could receive. Which, by the way, I love that Sydney says, oh, you could be entirely certain of the welcome you'd receive.
Yes. And they'd obviously had words before.
Exactly. So there's really just a couple more things to talk about that are random characters throughout. But that's the basic part of the episode. I think that we just need to touch on Old Stringer for a minute.
Yes.
And then the walk with Tom and Charlotte. Not Tom.
Stringer
and Charlotte. So first we see, right after the one of the picnic scenes, when they first start talking about their relationship, how they met each other between Otis and Georgiana, we come to Tom and James Stringer in town, and Stringer's very excited to show him his pagoda designs.
Right.
And Tom goes back on it. He says, you know what? Let's just stick with what we have. And Stringer's obviously disappointed. Stringer sees that as he's just back and forth. He can't make a decision. He's just untrusting or untrustable. But little did Stringer know it was because Tom was out of money. It wasn't because he didn't like his designs. It wasn't because he didn't want to do it. I bet Tom, because I feel like Tom gets a lot of flack, but I think he wanted as much of the town to be employed by this as he could. And I think he wanted to see James. I think he saw value in what James could do. Tom's a little prideful, but I think he also saw value in what James was able to do as an architect.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he wanted to tell him no, but he could not say yes. He didn't have the materials and he couldn't get them.
Well, and it's finally, you know, is this, I think that this is actually before he has that conversation with, before he has a conversation with Sydney, but he's realizing he doesn't have money to pay the men, much less take on another project.
Yep, exactly. And this is the first time that we see Tom use his authority and his status when he's talking to him. Because when Stringer says, you promised me a week ago, and Tom stands up a little taller and says, there's no need to use that tone.
Yes.
So he just he makes himself almost tower over Stringer for a minute, and Tom's never used his authority like that before.
No, that's right.
And that just shows you how far gone he is and how afraid he is.
Right. And it's interesting because all I can think about is those 3 wasted candles.
Yep, that's what I was thinking too. You're like, old Stringer was right. And then we see Tom buy the necklace. We don't see him buy the necklace. We see him looking at the necklace.
Right. That then shows up later.
And I didn't write too many notes about that because we did a Mary and Tom one.
Right.
You and I did together, I think, actually. And we talked in depth about the necklace. So we don't need to touch on that very much other than saying Tom bought a really extravagant, really expensive necklace for his wife in this episode. But then when James Stringer goes back to his dad with the crumpled up designs for the pagoda, and he says basically, you and I both know nothing Tom ever says can be trusted. And his dad says, hey, don't say that about the guy who's paying your wages and who's caring
Right.
for you. So he cautions against it, but it made me think two things. One, how many situations taught him that? How many employers did he? Because I think Old Stringer is an awful lot like James Stringer. He's just learned a bit more through the years. Because when we see him right before his accident, he's complaining about Tom Parker and how he hasn't given them men like he said he would. But now he's saying, no, don't do it. Part of it too is that Old Stringer can't work. So Tom,
he's dependent. Well, they're both dependent on this project.
Yep. And James is the only one bringing him money. And when I talked to Rob Jarvis about this, he was saying how his attitude towards his son, towards James, he felt was more a protecting of, I know what these people are like. I know what's going to happen if you go into this world. They're going to spit you out. And so it's not that I don't think you can do it, but it's very unsafe for you to do it because there's no guarantee that these people are not going to lord their status over you.
Right. And actually, I have read that part of the book where he talks he says a similar thing. He actually says it in the book, and that is that you can't get your hopes too high. You're not in that same status. In other words, you need to know your place and stay in it.
Yep. Is that what Rob Jarvis said in the book, or that's what the character Old Stringer said in the book?
Old Stringer says something similar to that in the book. Don't get we're not here. What he says is, we're not here to be their friends. We work for them.
Oh, that's a good insight. That's exactly right. And I think he sees Charlotte as a bit of that.
Yes.
And so when Charlotte and James went after, Sydney freaks out and says, Mr. Stringer, kindly take Miss Hayward home. And they're walking along the beach. I never really noticed it before, but when we first come on them, Charlotte's already giving James Stringer a sheepish look. Like she's just staring at him like, oh, what did you just see me do? But she's already looking at him for a long period of time. And then he turns and looks at her. And then she says, hey, I'm sorry you had to see that. Sorry.
Well, he says, I'm quite embarrassed at losing my temper. Or I'm upset with myself, something along those lines.
And he says, oh, I'm sure you had a good reason, miss. Oh, I did. Believe me, I did.
Yes.
Sure, Charlotte. Sure you did. But after their talk, this whole talk was Charlotte accidentally leading James Stringer on. She didn't mean to, but I don't think Charlotte realized the impact her words would have on a man who's not related to her family and who actually is following her around like a puppy dog.
Right. And especially in that time, she was probably so used to running around with her brothers everywhere.
Yep.
It didn't even occur to her. And I think she kind of thinks of him like that, like somebody from back home.
Yeah.
And she is so naive and unaware of what he might be thinking.
And it's a familial. I love that you brought that up because it's a familial love that she feels for Stringer, not a passionate romantic one.
Right. Yeah.
And he's open in his admiration for her. She just, and he's open in his flattery, but she is just, I think she's so full of Sydney.
Yeah.
That she misses it because every conversation she has with people, it has to do with Sydney in some way almost.
Right. And she does say to him, oh, that all men think like you.
And that's where she actually let him on.
Right. That's where she says that, and he takes it a different way than she means it. Yeah. She's thinking of the other men that aren't like that. And don't think that way. The other man in particular.
Exactly. And it wasn't even that she wanted, and I think Stringer took it as she thinks I'm the perfect guy. She thinks I'm perfect for her, I think is what he was thinking. But what she was saying is, why couldn't Sydney just shut up and listen to me the way you're shutting up and listening to me? And I think that's probably the extent of it. But poor Stringer, who's openly flattering this woman, openly admiring her, openly fawning over her, and Charlotte just Goes right over her head every single time. She doesn't even catch it at all. So I feel
Right.
so bad for James Stringer, especially in that episode 7. But I think
Yeah.
Charlotte did lead him on without even realizing she was doing it.
Well, and I also think the reason that, of course, I'm sure Sydney never thought for a minute they'd go walking on a beach, but
Yeah.
the I think he was seeing Stringer as a servant.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
You know.
I think Sydney too, because we've talked about how Sydney doesn't miss anything as it comes to Charlotte. I think he knew that Sydney would comply, or I think he knew James would comply because I think he noticed James fawning over Charlotte.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so I think he did. I mean, because what a weird thing to say to someone who happens to be walking by. Stringer wasn't there for Sydney. He wasn't even there for Tom. Stringer just happened to be
Well,
walking by and he picks him out of a crowd and says, "Hey, walk her home."
well, and I think that, of course, he knew who Stringer was, and also I think, I mean, and they just helped his father.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, he kind of owes me a little,
Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's a good
At
point.
least he would be respond favorably to me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's a little bit embarrassed about the whole outburst too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because I mean, Sydney could feel that he was starting to lose it emotionally, and I think that's why he called for someone to take her home, because he could not bear to lose it anymore in front of her. I think he already felt, well, she doesn't love me like I thought she did, and I think he kind of felt like I'm gonna have a meltdown.
Right.
No one can witness this.
Yeah.
And so
she had a higher opinion of me just a short time ago.
Yeah. Oh, that is such a devastating scene to watch for all the reasons that you hate it. It's miserable to watch that scene. Oh, we've come so close so many times and it's never going to happen again.
Yeah.
So we end episode 4 with
wait a
Charlotte.
minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go for it. Go for it.
With Charlotte going to Georgiana and saying, I am no longer in belief. I'm paraphrasing again because I don't have the script in front of me. Basically, I no longer believe that Sydney is good or honest or true. He is ornery, he's angry, and he is judgmental and self-righteous, and I'm going to help you, Georgiana. I'm going to help you communicate with Otis.
What she says is Sydney Parker is self-important, prejudiced, and cruel.
And I
And
was close.
You were close. And and yes, she is no longer under any disillusionment or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's going to make it her mission to defy Sydney by helping them.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so she agrees to help Georgiana against Sydney's will talk to Otis. And the only reason she helps is because she firmly believes that the only impediment to them being together is that Otis is a black guy, which
right.
Georgiana is a black girl. Why would Sydney care about that?
That's right.
I would find it more believable. It was, he's a merchant. Obviously, that's why I'm wealthy. He's a merchant. But to say that Sydney, and that she bought that so wholeheartedly, that Sydney didn't like Otis because he's a black guy when Georgiana's a black girl. So it frustrates me that Charlotte is that easily led at first.
Yeah. Yeah, she's, she totally fell into the way that Georgiana and Otis misled her.
Yeah. But she also thinks Georgiana's her friend. And I don't think Georgiana's really, I think they were friendly. I think Georgiana was Charlotte's friend because Charlotte cared about Georgiana. She paid attention to Georgiana. She listened to Georgiana. She helped Georgiana, whatever. She gave to Georgiana constantly. But Georgiana constantly took from Charlotte instead of gave.
At least through this episode.
And I think and obviously it has a lot to do with Georgiana is still young. Georgiana has had a lot of things hidden from her because, not just because she's a woman, but she's also black and she's also an heiress. So a lot of things have been hidden from Georgiana. So I think she still got the teenager mentality, the spoiled entitled mentality.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree.
And I think that will get better in season 2. I think that, as I'm just gonna say, there's gonna be a time jump. Because it's the only thing that makes sense. Since you brought that up to me, that's the only way I can think about it.
Yep, it's the most logical. How else can the kids be in there?
Exactly. And so I'm excited to see how Crystal Clark was masterful in that role. So I'm excited to see how she grows Charlotte on her own, but also how the writers give her that maturity, because I think they have some redeeming to do with Georgiana a little bit.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, that would be my shared opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So the very last thing we see is Charlotte writing her note.
Yep. No, the last thing we see is her dropping it off to the postman, and the postman carries
Oh,
it off,
that's
and
right.
she's smiling at the camera.
Yeah, that's right. She drops off the note to go to Otis, and so the next step takes place in the next episode.
I like her dedication to making sure it gets to where it needs to go.
Yeah.
Follows it all the way up the door. Make sure it gets on the thing.
And she kind of follows the carriage. I mean,
couple
the
steps.
coach,
Mhm.
which, she does later. She follows the carriage.
Oh,
So
yep.
it's repeated motion,
Mhm. Yeah. Whenever it's something heavy and something big and something weighty, it almost feels like, because this is before really bad things happened, it's when she follows the coach. It's almost like she has this intuition that, well, I have to watch this for as long as I can, because I'm never going to be able to do it this way again. I'm never going to get that innocence back again. I wonder if that was why they wrote it that way.
I don't know. And it's interesting too, when you were reading the book that they did with it, you can tell that it was written before the film was completed, at least, because there's differences in the way the directors, and I think this was probably an earlier script than the final script, because there's differences in some of the way some things happen in the book versus in the movie. And we know from listening to Lisa Clark talk about how they decided to do the scene where they go after the coach and run it down, the one that Georgiana's in,
Mhm.
and how Sydney jumps to the other coach. That was not in the original script. I haven't gotten to that part of the book yet, but in just the way things are handled with old Stringer's injury is slightly different in the book than it was in the movie.
I think I'm going to order that tonight. I need that. I say this every time I talk with you, don't I? I'm going to order that book tonight. Every time I talk to you, I say it. I'm really going to do it tonight. I'm determined. I'm going to do it tonight. Because every time you talk about it, no, you sent me the link already. You sent me the link when we did our very first podcast together.
Okay.
Which was what? An episode 2 recap? And we've done like 9 episodes since then.
Several.
So I need to do it tonight, or I'm gonna forget. But every time you talk about it, I'm like, I really want to read it. I'm so interested in what it has to say.
And it does there's some insights, because it's written as a book.
Yeah.
So it's not just the dialogue. And so the author puts some, gives you some insights into what they were thinking, and that kind of thing.
That's why I need it. Okay, so that wraps up episode 4. So next week we are going to take a mini break, and we are going to be having an interview with a crew member, a fairly important crew member. And maybe what we'll do is, if you can respond to this in our group, we'll put something up in our group, which, by the way, is the Sanditon Chronicles Sanditon Family Fan Club. Janice can't participate because she already knows. But the rest of you, go to our Facebook group, or I'll have it on Twitter too, under our handle @Sanditon the. That's our Twitter name. It's the Sanditon Chronicles. And I'll also do it on our Instagram page, which is the.sanditon.chronicles. Also, the Sanditon Chronicles. So go to one of those. I'll have an edit on there where we'll go through guesses of who it is, and whoever can guess who it's going to be, I'll send you a vinyl that you can put on some clothing or a water bottle or something. We'll discuss that when you win and what you want. If you go to our group page, you can see some pictures. I sent some contest winners some vinyls before, and they were able to attach it to their tote bag. So, well, maybe we'll do a game of it this week, see who can guess.
All right.
But on
I
that
want to
note,
tell you something after you stop recording.
Okay. On that note, we're gonna leave. We're gonna head you out to think about it all week long, and we'll see you in a week when we talk to our next interviewer. Almost said his name just there. All right. Bye, guys. See you in a week.